Hey guys, it's Don Duran from NSI Solutions. It's collared shirt day today, so that means we're making videos. Today, I want to show you some seam phantom maintenance. We're going to show you how to replace the most commonly replaced items on your seam phantom. Also, we have some construction going on in the building, so there may be some background noise. It just is what it is. So today, I have the seam phantom right out of our shop next door. This was made in August of 2008. It's been in continuous use for 12 years. About once a year, we take it apart, clean it all up, replace anything that needs to be replaced. Now, nothing really needs to be replaced, but this is the model we're going to use to show you how to do this. I also have a brand new electric demo unit. It's a used grinder, but a brand new seam phantom, and we'll show you some things on that also. Now, on this one from our shop, the best thing, the easiest thing you can do for your seam phantom is to give it a bath. These things get so dirty, so gritty. When the grit dries, it gets crunchy. This one, I picked it up, it's pretty stiff, it's still working, still usable, and it'll loosen up when it gets wet. But we're gonna take this apart first, and then we are going to clean it. To get it apart, you just undo the adjustment screw all the way. You may have to help it when it gets right to the end, when they're really gritty. I see these all the time though that have been hammered on with a hammer. Never a good idea. There we go. So we get that apart. There's the nut, don't lose that. The air ones come apart just like that. The electric, there's one more step. You have the water tube on the electric. To get this disconnected, there's a little ring right here on the tube fitting. You need to pull that back and disconnect the tube. And then, of course, this one comes apart super easy because it's brand new. Then it'll come apart. Anyway, I have a bucket of water. I'm going to throw this one and clean it. I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing. We'll come back when it's clean. Okay guys, that's pretty clean. You'll notice I did run a little bottle brush through the bushings. You can use a rag and a stick or a screwdriver just to clean those out. I did use some bronze wool. There was a little bit of grit embedded in these rods, so I cleaned that off. Bronze wool, just a bit of a trick. Don't use real steel wool. Steel wool will get particles of mild steel embedded in your stainless rod and they will rust. So you can use bronze wool or you can use Scotch-Brite to help clean that. Anyway, the first part I'm going to show you how to replace is the rub plate. Now, when these rub plates start to wear, they wear more on the back, and that'll make your seam phantom sag, which you can see if we put that back together real quick. If it's worn more on the back, it'll sag this way. It opens up the bottom of your seam. So whenever anyone calls me and says, well, the front of my seam, you can't see it on the bottom, but you can see it in the front. the front of my seam's opening up and I can't figure out what to do, usually I have them replace the rub plate and everything goes back to the way it was. It's very simple. The air rub plate now is just a plain plate. These are called a WRPA on our website. These are available from distributors. The rub plates are the only spare parts available through distributors. All the other spare parts you have to get off our website. There are exploded diagrams also on the website to help you find the parts in the store. Anyway, to remove that rub plate, it's an 1/8 inch Allen wrench, and you simply take out these 8 screws. The grit shield here will come off also. And if you want to go a little faster, you can use an 1/8 inch Allen wrench in a driver. So just a note on this particular seam phantom, this started out life as an electric and then was converted to air. So you see now as an air seam phantom, you use the air rub plate. They're a little less expensive than the electrics, and because the water comes out the center water feed, you don't need water channels in the rub plate. So anyway, you just put that right back on the way it came off, put your grit shield back on at the same time. 2 of the screws go through the grit shield. I'm going to get them started with the driver. Of course, you can do this all by hand, but we do so many of them that we use power tools. Don't over torque it with the driver because it will crush the plastic. So I always use a hand tool to finish them. So we'll tighten those by hand to make sure we don't crush the plastic. You can replace the screws if you want to, if you've let it wear down so much that it's dragging on the screws, that the glide guide's dragging on the screws. You can replace those also, but normally you don't need to. Okay. Now, an electric seam phantom, there is one thing to look out for. There's an O-ring in here. So on the electric, water comes out here and here, so you have to use the rub plate with water channels in it. It's called a WRPE on our website. Let me show you the O-ring. So when you take this off, there's a little O-ring right there that fits in that groove. When you put a new one back on, make sure that's sitting back in there and not popped out. And you can just kind of hold it in place to keep that O-ring from popping out, and get a couple of screws. I always put the ones in first, kind of next to the O-ring. And then you just put all 8 screws back in and you're good to go again on that. So the rest is obvious. I won't put those last few screws in. Next, I want to show you how to replace the wheels. Now, the wheels, there's nothing wrong with these wheels. They last a really long time. I rarely see a wheel that's worn out. What I do see is seam phantoms that get dropped. It hits the corner of the wheel and breaks a corner out of it, and then on the glide guide it's bumping along, and so they end up replacing the wheels. So to remove the wheels, it's a bit of an unusual fastener. You need a 5/32 Allen wrench and a 9/16 wrench, open end wrench. There's an Allen in the thread end of this bolt and a nut on the same side. So you hold that Allen, remember lefty-loosey, and that's counterclockwise on the nut. So they are locking nuts, so they do take a little bit of force to get off. I'll just replace one of these so you can see how it's done. You can reuse the nut. Now when you take this out, there is a tiny or a thin bearing spacer washer right there on top of that. Don't lose that. The new wheels are for sale individually on our website. You can buy new axles and hardware if you think you need it, but honestly, you rarely need it. The head of this, the thin head, drops into the counter bore on this wheel. So it goes in that way so that it's below the surface. And then you put your bearing shim back on. You can wipe this off a little bit. Get some grit out of there. Slide that back up through there. And then you can put your nut back on. Okay, tighten that up. The other wheel is done exactly the same way. Just as a side note, not many seam phantoms have this little plastic piece that sticks out anymore. We called this a kickstand. It was on the first couple hundred units. So most of them, this side looks exactly like this side. So replacing the wheel is absolutely the same. Now the last part I want to show you how to replace is the adjustment screw. The screws last a long time. What does happen to them is if it gets dropped and hits on the handle, the screw will bend. If it'll bend right here. They're stainless steel, you can bend them back or you can replace them. And then if you just let it get so gritty that you're just forcing it, you will eventually ruin the grooves that the E-clips are in. Anyway, you can buy a new adjustment screw kit on our website. I think it's called SUPGR. By the way, the wheels I think are just GWA on the website. Now when you get it, it comes like this with the shim washers, and the E-clips. You need to pop off the E-clip closer to the threads. I use just a small screwdriver to pop that off. Make sure you don't shoot it. Across the shop, set your washers aside. And there are two 5/1000 thick shim washers in there. I'll show you what to do with those. The same thing here. You just pop this inside E-clip off. And this, by the way, is probably the most lost part. I get lots of calls, guys just looking for E-clips. So a lot of our kits have E-clips in them. Save them, because chances are in the future you'll need them. They are stainless steel. You can buy an E-clip at the hardware store, of course, but probably not stainless steel. So save them. Even if you have one out of the two that are good, just save it for future. That will slide right out. was a little harder than I expected. Must be a bunch of grit on there, or it's gotten bent. Now, you can replace these plastic bushings. There's kit again on the website, but you rarely have to replace them. So, the new screw, you want to take one of the thicker washers, put it on here, drop this through, actually I'm going to look and see why that is hard. See if there's just some grit or something right there. Okay. Again, the thicker washer goes up against this first E-clip. Slide that through. Another thick washer on this side. And then the E-clip. Now, if you're have backlash in here or play, you can put in a shim washer. It looks like the screw I took off actually had 2 shim washers in it. It was a little tight. I'm just going to put in one. When you put in the shim washer, you don't put it next to the groove. You want to put it on the other side of the thick washer. So you can either pull this out and put it on back here, or you can put it on and then put the thick washer on. But if you put it next to the E-clip, it'll drop down in the slot, and you really don't want that because that's going to give you all kinds of trouble. So we're going to put one shim washer on, go back through, that's the thick washer, and the E-clip. Now I put the smooth side of the E-clip towards the washer, doesn't really matter. And just clip that on. That spins really easy. There is virtually no play in there. So what I've found is you don't want to start with them too tight, because as they get grittier, they only get tighter. So I prefer to start with them a little loose. And then you can put this back together. You can replace the nut if you think you need to, but normally they're fine. Slide that back in there. And she'll go back together. So you can see that works much easier. The rub plate's not worn. I only replaced one wheel. I'll replace the other one off camera. And it's good to go again. On the electric, everything's the same except the O-ring and disconnecting the tube like I already showed you. Otherwise, it's some very simple maintenance and repair. We do this about once a year, and like I said, this has been in continuous use for 12 years. So, there you have it. I hope that was helpful. Stay safe, tight lines, go Mariners.